world which the governments do not control. That is the world of finance. The men who guide the ebb and flow of money. With them rests the decision whether they will make that river a beneficent flood to quicken life, or a dead glacier which freezes wherever it moves, or a torrent of burning lava to submerge and destroy. The men who control that river have the ultimate word.
I'd like to say that what Alan has been talking about is the most powerful subject in the world at the moment. He's touching 10,000 volts because whoever controls the money in the world controls the whole thing, quite obviously. He quoted that statement of Rothschild's. Give me permission to issue the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. So I want to just elaborate a little bit on that and try and give you perhaps a bit of Australian history and a bit of background to what all that is about. Just the other day, in the middle of March, we had a gathering up in Quebec City in Canada. 25,000 protesters were there. It ended up in wild violence with large numbers of police and ordinary people being hurt in the process. It was the scene for the trial of a new crowd control weapon, which is an electromagnetic beam. And if you shine this beam, it will reach people 400 meters away and virtually immobilize them. It just penetrates about half the distance or the thickness of your skin and makes you so itchy that you just cannot stand still. And as soon as it's turned off, you can move again. And they tried this thing out, and it seemed to work, but it didn't stop the bloodshed. Now, that meeting that was held in Quebec City was about extending NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association that Alan was mentioning, that big bloc, into a free trade association that will cover all the Americas. Every nation in America was there attending, and it would be a bloc that would become a dollar bloc extending from the Arctic Circle down to Cape Horn. That's a pretty big area. Did you know that during the last 18 months, 7 countries have abandoned their own money systems and have accepted the American dollar as their official currencies now? And that the proposition currently being discussed in Southeast Asia is, if Indonesia can't hang together, and it's unlikely that it can, because if you think about Indonesia, which is only just to our north, it is an archipelago of 13,000 islands, 26 different races with their own languages, and it is the biggest Islamic country in the world. And it is exploding. Whether Gus Dor, as he's called, or Wahid can remain in power is questionable. But if he does go, there's going to be an expansion of civil war. But the proposition behind all that is that they should abandon their own money system and accept the American dollar as the official currency of Indonesia. Now, all this ties in with the idea that we are gradually being edged and shoved and moved towards the replacement of national currencies with some sort of global currency or at least regional currency. Whether the Asia-Pacific Economic Community ends up as a yen bloc or a dollar bloc, is immaterial. Basically, we'd lose the right to run our own money systems. So Alan raised the question, which is a pretty good question. Would this be a good thing or would it be a bad thing? My own belief is that the argument in the world is about something called sovereignty. Who will be sovereign? And there's only two ideas about sovereignty. The one is that sovereignty is simply the accumulation of a commodity called power. And you can exercise this power and you can produce the results that you want. And right through the whole of human history, we've had people trying to accumulate this stuff called power, whether it was Alexander the Great, or whether it was Genghis Khan, or whether it was Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin. All of them wanted power. And most of them were idealistic. They had this feeling, if I had the power, I could make everything very good for everybody and they would all love me. That you gather. So quite obviously, if we ended up with some sort of global system or world government, we would have a greater accumulation of power than has ever been seen in the whole history of humankind. And those who are pushing this idea say, look, we've now got the technology, we've got the brains to produce peace on earth. Give us all the brains and give us the best computers, and we'll produce a spreadsheet and everybody's going to be happy from there on. That's one idea. The opposite idea to that is that the source of sovereignty is not in your nation or your community, it's in here. That each person has a little bit of sovereignty that I believe is God-given, and with that sovereignty you can develop your life. And everybody's going to do this differently because we're all absolutely unique. There are no two people the same. Everybody has different talents. Everybody has a different purpose. Now, you can share your sovereignty to produce a result, but you lose your freedom if you also lose the right to retract out if the thing doesn't suit what you believe is right. And there is no meeting point between those two ideas. Either you believe in personal freedom and you honor the freedom of your neighbor, or else you believe that's expendable in producing a certain specified result by the accumulation of power. All of us have to make that choice. Now, something has happened in Australia. It is very, very dramatic. Part of it is the energy in this room today. Part of it is an energy that is spreading from community to community, and it's very different from what happened when I began speaking, which was 34 years ago, believe it or not. I've been going around shouting my mouth off for 34 years. We went through all that period when we had the Vietnam demonstrations, and then we went through a long period where people were so appalled at what was happening they tried to contract out. We had a huge movement into alternative lifestyles, and we had the flower people. But you can't contract out of that. And so the new mood is one of we get together and we really synergize to get the results that we want. And that is a brilliant new development. And part of it is demonstrated in what happened in Quebec City, or the S11 demonstrations in Melbourne, or the huge demonstrations in Prague they had the other day, or whatever it happens to be, Seattle. And all of this now is organized by the very technology that is often used against us through the internet. Hundreds and thousands of people are now networking and are getting news that you don't get through the major media. And with that news, they're beginning to shape new purposes, and they're not going to surrender their sovereignty, and it's a great change. But control of money is the key to the whole thing. Just about 30 years ago, 1971, I was invited here in Brisbane to go before the Country Party, it used to be called, and the management committee called a special meeting to try and discuss how they were going to save farmers in Australia. And we had at that stage over 200,000 farmers in this country. And I was one of 3 speakers to be invited to put forward propositions. And my proposition was quite simple. We had to use our own money system here in Australia, and we had to get capital available to farmers at 2 or 3% interest if they were going to survive. And the other 2 speakers, one was an economist from University of Queensland, whose